Our super special guest is Mandisa Lateefa Thomas. I had the pleasure of working with her on the board of Foundation Beyond Belief. She is the founder and president of Black Nonbelievers. She recently won the Unitarian Universalist Humanist Association 2018 Person of the Year Award. And the other thing that's important that I am very excited to hear about is her recent career shift. I'll let her tell you about that. So here is Mandisa. Hello, Mandisa. Can you hear us?
Yes. Hello, Claire. Hello, Jen.
Hey.
It's been such a long time.
It's been too long.
Since the last time we have seen each other.
Right
and
on.
Thank you so much for having me on the show.
Oh, it's our pleasure.
I really do appreciate it.
We're really excited to have you.
We're snazzed.
Yeah. I'm glad. I know we see each other online a lot, but this is the first time I've heard y'all voices in so long.
Right.
So I'm really, really happy to be here.
Right.
Yeah, we got to do something about that.
Right. It's just wrong.
Yeah.
We need to get you here. Come to Austin. It's awesome. So would you like to tell us about your recent career shift and all that means?
Actually, yes. For those of you who aren't aware, and thank you very much for the introduction.
Sure.
I am the founder and president of Black Nonbelievers Incorporated, which is based in Atlanta, Georgia, in the Atlanta area. And for the past 7 years now, we started in 2011. We've gone from a local organization to national, where we now have 11 chapters across the United States. We just established one in the Cincinnati, Ohio area. So we've been working diligently to increase the visibility and support, particularly for Black atheists and atheists who are Blacks who are doubting religion within the Black community.
Right.
And we've been that official organization that has been reaching out and working to actually connect folks, not just within the Black community, but also within the secular community. And for the past 7 years, I have been doing all of this while working a full-time job, as well as being a full-time mother, as well as being a full-time wife.
Right on.
To a husband who has sickle cell anemia.
Oh, my. Yeah.
And so, when we talk about, and I'm so sorry to hear about your condition right now, Claire. I really hope that improves very soon, because people don't understand life happens to us.
Yeah, right.
And I've been doing all of this while working full-time. And so I was 3 years into my job when we started Black Nonbelievers. And because it was, and it still is, a volunteer organization, I was able to work, within my days off and within my work hours and outside of my work hours to conduct being business and do the things that we were able to do for it. But this year, over time, the demands and the requests within the community have increased, which I'm very, very happy about and I'm very proud of. And the upcoming award, the award for Person of the Year is upcoming. That will take the ceremony and will take place in June in Kansas City. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
Right on.
There became a need this year for me to quit my job and put it aside so that I can go to being an activist full time. Black Nonbelievers and the movement does need my presence more. It needs my work more.
Yeah.
It is where I have determined that my time would be best suited and actually working within this community on issues pertaining to people of color, pertaining to women, pertaining to the LGBT community that we still need to work on. That there's a tide that is changing, and it just became that time for me to hang up the full-time job in order to be able to do this more often or to do it fully.
Right on. So how are you supporting yourself on that? I mean,
I've created a Patreon account.
Cool.
Similar to, I know Matt Dillahunty, Seth Andrews, and, there are others that have Patreon subscriptions where there's content created that people can subscribe to monthly. And I have done the same thing. One thing about me is that I'm very unorthodox. I'm a very unorthodox individual, always have been. for those who aren't familiar with my background, I was pretty much raised secular. Mm-hmm. So there is an experience and the perspective that I have growing up secular, as a Black woman within the Black community, that I know can be very beneficial within the atheist community, because there's a lot of things that are missed. And I think being able to, I like the description of the podcast where you say you're providing positive atheism, mm-hmm. because we definitely, and that's something that at Black Non-Believers we do as well. Mm-hmm. Because once people have reevaluated their relationship or, their religious perspective, then what happens from there? How do people move forward from there? And that's what we encourage, that community building, those connections, people being able to do more openly as atheists, and as well as normalizing and destigmatizing atheism, particularly amongst the communities that need them. Well, and so I provide. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Finish your thoughts.
Oh no, I was saying that I'm working on I'll be doing some live streaming on Patreon where people can ask me questions directly. I'll be speaking on certain subjects that are near and dear to me, as well as providing some good and unfiltered advice on how to better improve on community building. Because there's a lot of there's a lot of good talk about how to do it, but people aren't necessarily doing it.
Right.
And so I think I know that I've built up enough of a rapport and done enough work in this community, as well as being able to do it, from what my previous job was. I was an event services manager at the CDC. And that detailed a lot of execution, a lot of hands-on work. So I have that ground-up experience and expertise, and it has shown in the growth of Black non-believers. I think it has shown with building my own profile in the movement, which wasn't intentional on building my profile. It really was to create this organization and to expand it for others that needed it.
Right.
So I think that I have enough credibility in this movement to show that, there is something that is of value that I know that I can provide. And certainly the support, I can't do this without the support of the people who have expressed that they've appreciated and needed it.
Yeah, I was just going to.
So this is what I'm hoping to be able to do, especially in the near future.
Yeah, we have your Patreon information up on the screen here. So anybody that goes to the YouTube channel and sees this on YouTube will see your Patreon credentials up there. And I just wanted to comment on the whole community building aspect of it. And by the way, Tracie just arrived, so she's plugging in here. Hey. But all three of us have been.
Hey, Mandisa.
All three of us have been involved in that whole, community building and running, a local community. And we understand it's a non-trivial amount of work. It takes real commitment to do that. And I think it's just amazing you've been able to not only do that locally, but also kind of expand this out to other places and identify the people that could help you grow this movement. Because I think it's, the community aspect of religion is something that we can easily replicate within our own communities. But again, it takes a lot of work and commitment to do that. So,
I know, Mandisa, that you're asked this often, and this dovetails with what Jen is talking about, the community and so forth. But I think the answer to this question bears repeating is, why Black non-believers? What does being Black have to do with the importance of a certain type of community?
Absolutely. And by the way, Bree says hello to everyone.
Oh, hey.
If you aren't familiar with Bree.
Yeah. Hey, Bree.
Is one of our board members. And she's one of our board members for Black Non-Believers, and she's also over our Detroit affiliate.
Right on.
So that is a very good question that we do get asked very often. The most recent Pew Research numbers show that 87% of Blacks in the United States are still very religious. Now, while the number of non-religious are growing within the United States, that is still a very staggering number. within the Black community. And there are a number of reasons for that. A number of them are historical. It goes back to the slavery within the United States, of course, which some did not have a choice of.
Oh, my God.
I'm not even going to go there. But,
Don't even.
I just had to kind of put that in there.
Oh, my God. That's
foolish. There's a lot that has to do with tradition and the culture and the climate of the Black community, with the church being so involved with that doctrine of suffering and waiting for an afterlife, and being forced with this religion, being forced on slaves in this country. And once slavery ended, with the church being so prevalent and institution and crucial and critical to Black life, whether it was establishing historically Black colleges and universities, providing community support, as well as a sense of aspiration, and leadership, and a sense of prominence within the community. The church has played such a huge part in the Black community that it is very, very difficult to disassociate from the identity. So that therefore, although there were a lot of religious people that were involved within the civil rights movement per se, for example, the perception is that the Black church was so instrumental to the struggles in our community that it was God that brought us through everything. So you have this very, very emotional dynamic and this cultural dynamic within the Black community that makes it almost impossible to disassociate for many Black folks. So when you're rejecting God, it's like you're rejecting your community, you're rejecting your race, you're rejecting your culture.
Right.
And there's a lot that goes along with that, considering the climate of tensions that still take place within the United States.
Right. And so this is something I've heard over and over again from so many Black atheists who've said that, it's not only all of the baggage that, say, a white atheist would have breaking away from their family's religious traditions. You have all that stuff, plus all the cultural stuff on top of that. Yep. And
that is correct.
And there is this, if you say the word atheist and ask someone what comes to mind, it's invariably a middle-aged white guy. And so there's this image of what an atheist is, and I think that for particularly young Black people struggling with questions of religion and everything, it's easy to say, well, that's not me. And it's
right. And this is a problem too, because we also inform and educate on the history of humanism, free thought, and atheism within the Black community, which the overall secular community is lacking.
Right.
But we haven't, the one thing we haven't done is try to rely on the overall community to make that a priority, even though it should. I remind folks that the Foundation for Black History Month was started by a freethinker, Dr. Carter G. Woodson.
Yeah.
That historically there have always been atheists in our community. The history of the Black community isn't always just about struggle. It's about perseverance.
Right.
People who have been able to overcome, the struggles, not just the struggles, trials and tribulations. And there are many historically Black atheists, humanists, and freethinkers that have contributed, but unfortunately, their legacy is obscured by religious folks in the church. Yeah. And this is something that we have to do to reshape, to redefine the narrative and to redefine the legacy of our communities, because it doesn't just belong to old white men. Atheism does. There have been atheists in our community, and there are more coming. But they need to know that there's always been that representation, and that there's actually more to come. That's what we're building and developing.
Right, and so
it's been.
Yeah, I think what you're doing is so important, because I sometimes hear mostly white people asking, why aren't there more Black atheists? And alternatively, when they see a group like Black non-believers, well, why you got to have
Your own group.
Your own group,
Right.
Aren't you just
Right.
being divisive? And it's like, well, the overall atheist community as a whole has, at best, been indifferent to the concerns and needs of Black atheists, and at worst has been dismissive and sometimes openly hostile to people who are not white, not cisgendered, not heterosexual. So, there is a need.
100%.
There is a need to carve out a place. And that's how I see it, is you're carving a space for yourself in a movement that is, at best, sometimes indifferent to what you need.
Absolutely, it is, and we many of us have experienced this firsthand. Very much so. People will wonder, well, why are our groups basically so white? Well, what can we do? And then when we tell folks what they can do, it falls on deaf ears.
Right.
So it's like, well, you don't really want to do anything different.
Yeah.
You may be saying that you do. And then when we see, and I'm a type of person, I'm the individual that, look, I'm not just going to wait for something to come to me. I need to make it happen.
Right.
And I do tend to get restless, and I am a person of action, that if there is a step that I can take, then I'll do it. And yes, there is still a need for us to assert that identity within both communities, because for one, yes, there has been that indifference and that, and then also there's this push for any person of color. Like whenever we do speak, it's like, well, have you heard of Richard Dawkins or Sam Harris? There's always this need to back that up by a white atheist, and it's like, wow, way to miss the point.
Right?
Way to miss the point on that.
Yeah. And, that reminds me of an email that we got shortly after we announced the Godless Bitches reboot. A guy emailed us to say, hey, since you've got this, women-only atheist feminist podcast that you're rebooting, you should have, a male-only podcast. You could call it...
nonprofits?
Yeah. You could call it, I think he said heathen bastards or something like that. And I was sitting there looking at that thinking, yeah, that's what we're missing in the community is
male voices.
Male voices.
Yeah.
More white guys, yeah.
Yeah, more white guys.
I think the thing, too, though, is that there's not like a ban on males on this show.
Right.
Right? It just happens that it's three women. It's funny because we do get the occasional letter regarding nonprofits or regarding the Atheist Experience saying, why aren't there more women voices, or why don't you invite? And I've even seen nonprofits get attacked, right? Like, why don't you have women on there? Like, what is it? And it's like, well, they have invited women on,
right.
and I've filled in, and I actually remember years ago them asking women specifically in ACA. There was a few people that got approached, and it was just like, would you be interested in doing this regularly?
Right.
So it's not that they're closed to a female voice on nonprofits. It's just it happens to be guys. And so when you have the three women, people are like, well, why is it just why is it just women? And it reminds me of that Ruth Bader Ginsburg quote where they asked her how many women should be on the Supreme Court.
Right.
And she said all of them. And I remember people were freaking out about that comment. And it's like you realize that until 1930, it was all men.
Yeah.
Like every court makeup was all men, and yet that was acceptable. But when somebody suggests, what if it was all women, suddenly that's horrific.
Yeah.
You're excluding men. And it's like, why was it okay to exclude women all the way up to 1930?
Yeah.
It shows you how far we need to go.
Well, I think that there's this thing. It's like you're saying, there's different perspectives, and different demographics to a different degree are considered, quote, like the norm. And so you have this sort of normal that people don't question. So when it's all men, people don't tend to notice. Because, well, it's men. Men are normal, right? And if you're not men, then we notice it, And like I say, it's not 100%, but it's frequent. I did a post recently, just the other day, about somebody had posted on demographics in the U.S. There was this thing going around. I'm not even going to get into it. It was about cultural appropriation, and I wasn't as attached to the original post, but one of the things that caught my eye were some of the comments that people were making. And I was like, wow, these comments are really abysmal, right? And they were doing this thing where it's just like, well, then what about American culture? Like what? And the quote, the quote, right? Thank you. The quote American culture that they were listing, was like Happy Days, right? And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. I'm like third generation Italian American. And I didn't grow up with hot dogs and baseball. I grew up with cannolis and lasagna, and and that was an American cultural experience. That's why they call it Italian American.
Yes. I'm gonna chime in here for a moment, because it's amazing what people will perceive as American culture and think that we all, are, that we all agree. When the incident with in Charlottesville, where the where those white guys, where they had the protest or the rally, where they were basically today's modern day Klan,
right?
And people were so surprised, like, oh my gosh, how could this happen in this day and age? How could this happen in this country? And if you're a person of color, we're like, well, it never went away.
Yeah,
You're right.
Like this is the America we know.
Right.
This is the America that we grew up with. This is the America that our ancestors grew up with. It wasn't a happy days for many of my ancestors.
Well, and I got to tell you, as a white woman growing up in the South, people will assume that you share a particular viewpoint on that, and they will share things with you that are frightening. That
sure,
I've often been astonished by how readily people will reveal their. I think the polite term we use these days is alt-right, but it's really,
racist.
They're racist. They're white nationalists. They're Klan. Some of them are neo-Nazis, and it's all about these other people over there are responsible for everything that's wrong with their life. And
The epitome of that is there's a supposed to be funny video going around about how friendly people from the South are. And I'll tell you what, they're friendly if you're white, look Christian at least, don't dress inappropriately in their view, definitely cis, definitely hetero. And it's just... it's just not true. I have been outside of their parameters, and the friendly stops.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
So it shows a huge white privilege window right there.
yes,
White, cis, het, Christian window there.
yep.
Kind of dovetailing on that, Mandisa, I have another question for you. In our world, being a black woman has its challenges, and being an atheist woman has its challenges, and being a black atheist has its challenges, and then there's being a black atheist woman. What do you want those of us who are not in that narrow but powerful demographic to know? How can we do better?
I don't, I want people to know that. I know for me in particular, and I can speak for quite a few other black atheists, is that we're not looking for pity.
No, God, no.
Support is always great. We didn't do this because we were looking for acceptance. We did it. I know we did it because it needed to be done. It was necessary.
Right.
And fear doesn't run my life. It never has. I've always been an outspoken individual, and many of us possess the same qualities and same drive and desire as many of our white counterparts. The church and state separation is very, very important to me. Reproductive rights, LGBT rights, human rights, all of those things are very, very important. But I think, though, that it is important. It is crucial now more than ever that people are doing some introspection and self-reflection on how they are communicating and how they may be turning people away, based on their lack of consideration in regards to people, because you can't build community without people. Mm-hmm. And granted, there's all different types of people in this community.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Some who we want to engage with, and some who we can't, and that's okay. I just want, I need for more people to understand that that there are more voices out here. There are more people out here than they think. One of the accomplishments, I won't even say goals now because it has been an accomplishment. One of the things that Black non-believers has done has amplified and increased those voices. There is now there are now Black atheist authors that you can reference, that we can point you to, speakers and activists that have come through our organization, and they're coming up and they're making their way because they've connected sufficiently with us and have found their voice and have found their sense of activism. So we're not looking for pity. The one thing, we don't need saviors.
No, right.
And we shouldn't be looking for saviors. We're here to save ourselves.
That's right.
But the thing is that, again, we can't do this without support. And those connections and such are important. There are many people who seem to think, oh, well, those poor, Black atheists, and it just becomes lip service, which annoys me to no end.
Right. And
I don't see y'all that way at all.
Yeah. Well, and people don't seem to grasp, there's a massive difference between, paying lip service to something in the form of these poor Black atheists, and actually sitting and listening and trying to understand why, coming to atheism is different for Black people than it is for white people. Yeah. And it's understanding that I think is what's missing in a lot of areas. That I mean, sometimes we got to sit down and just shut up and listen.
Yeah.
Listening.
Yeah, and also that the emotional labor shouldn't always fall on us to make you understand.
Absolutely.
Because we're getting that a lot, too. We get a lot of people that say, well, how can we help? What can I do? I don't know what to do. But yet this goes back to when we tell you what to do and when we advise you on what to do, you don't follow through. Or it's like, I can't do that. Well, then if you can't do it, then why'd you ask?
Right.
All you're doing is getting in our way.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
One more point before there are, I get approached by people who are paid to do this work in this movement, but it's like they want us to do their work for them. And I'm like, no, that just cannot happen anymore. Yeah. Because then you're not being, and these are people who call themselves humanists.
Right. Yeah, we had
we
had a situation several years ago with a member of the ACA who, every time a woman or someone non-white would come to, say, an ACA lunch, he would approach them and say, "Oh, hey, I noticed that you're a woman," or "I noticed that you're Black, and we don't have many people like you here." And I finally went to him and I said, "Look, you got to stop doing this to people." And he's like, "What do you mean?"
Right.
And he's like, "I'm just trying to welcome him to the group because, we don't have very many women or Black people." And I'm like, "Look, nobody wants to be the token anything. And that's what you're doing to people, Just bring them into the group. Ask them about what they do, how they became an atheist. Listen to their story. Don't point out the one thing that is going to other them in this group."
I really like what Mandisa was saying, though. Mandisa, I really like what you were saying about, the people that get paid to do this. And immediately the first thing I think of, is when I tell people it's not my job to explain this to you. Yeah. And that's the thing. It reminds me, I have a good friend who is a trans activist. And a lot of times if I see something or I'm not sure about something, I will run it past her and kind of say, well, here's what I'm thinking about it, but, can I do the sanity check here? Well, what's interesting, though, is before I contact her, I go and research it.
Right.
I don't just go to her and say, hey, can you tell me what to think about this?
Exactly.
Like, I go online and I say, okay, this is a weird question. This is a weird thing to think about. This is something I haven't seen before. And so I'll go look it up and I'll read what people have written, like in favor of it, against it, like what's going on with this thing. And then I formulate a view of it that I think is informed. And then I might go to her and say, look, I've got this thing that I just came across. And you're probably aware of it. I'm not. I just saw it. But I went in and I did look this up and saw this stuff, and I was really impressed by this and this and this. And ultimately, what I think is this, am I missing something? And I also make a point to tell her, please don't let me abuse my privilege of association with you by making you like the trans person who filters everything for me, or that I run to every time I have it. You're not just the trans person that I know. And so I think it's really important that it's like I acknowledge her experience and I acknowledge her knowledge with regard to this sufficiently that I am willing to go to her and say, look, I want to hear the opinion here of somebody that is in this community, that works with this and that understands it, has a handle on it. I also don't want to waste her time, so I spend my time looking into it first. And I also try to make it really clear to her that I respect the fact that I am requesting her feedback and her time, and that she does not owe this to me.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, there are more people who can follow that example. I think it is important for us to, as I said, build those bridges and keep those connections in place. And it's better to ask the question and better to be prepared than to just shoot off and, you look and sound ridiculous.
Right.
And just being humble goes a long way. I see a lot of people asking questions and they're just not humble. They assume that they're right and that, and they also come off as angry. Just be humble. I see it on your page all the time. I see it on Alex Jewell's page all the time. I'm like, wow, people, do you hear yourselves? It's just obnoxious. Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely. And it's like, well, because I had this experience with, with someone last week, who came to my page and talked about, as being a staunch skeptic, and
I saw
they
that,
look for in the movies, and was dismayed that I did not possess the same, qualities or whatever. And I'm like, wow, way to assume that I don't, for one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But also there's a huge difference as a customer service professional and as a hospitality professional on how I do things. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm not embarrassed by that, and I'm not going to apologize for that, because that is something that I do discuss in my presentations, how we engage, how people should be, especially if you say you want to do better.
Right.
Yeah. Well, this is how you can do better. And this is how you should be doing better when you are engaging people of color, when you're engaging women, when you're engaging each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's just so amazing and astounding that they don't think we know that. Like somehow they think they know better than us.
Yeah,
I want to say that it's, I want to say it's, because, we're black or whatever. But, there's just still this undertone, especially the men. The men do this more often.
Yeah. Well, and it reminds me of men who always want to chime in and offer rape prevention tips to women, It's like, oh, really? Are these the things that work for you to prevent you from being raped?
Right.
That's awesome. Oh. But, they act like women don't spend almost every day of our lives thinking about how to not get sexually assaulted from about puberty on.
The way I move through the world is governed by that.
Yeah.
It is. I would not walk certain places. I would not go out certain times of days. I would not, et cetera, et cetera. I walked here to the ACA today. It's because I felt safe.
Right.
If I hadn't, and I don't think men think about that as much.
Right. Well, and the thing is, I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that we're sitting around cowering in fear and obsessing over
it's
this.
Just
it's
something
just an item on the checklist for every woman out there.
Yep.
And, you know, it's so ingrained as a habit that we run through the checklist real quick, and that's, like I said, it's one item on the checklist, but there's not a day that you don't think about.
Yeah. And I've seen incidences, and this has happened to me, where you have an incident, something that occurs, and then it makes you question, like, whether or not you need to change the way you're doing something. Like, literally, you change something that is just, like, a normal part of your routine or your life because you're basically like, I don't want this to happen again. And it's people, that's what people that do these things, right? People that perpetrate this kind of a fear, to me, you know, it's not just about the victim. It's about the idea of creating this sort of self-imposed prison in people, right? They're literally using fear to then make everyone else or certain groups of people feel like they then have to restrict themselves in order to not be victimized, which to me is the most grotesque part of it, right? And so when people get into the idea of promoting that in a way by saying, oh, we should all restrict ourselves like this and this, and basically promoting that we need to create an environment where everyone lives in self-imposed prisons so that, you know, you're not victimized. And if you don't, and then the worst one is when you don't do it, and somebody else wants to then blame you, right? And say, well, you know, were your doors locked? How were you dressed? How were, you know, what was going on? Did you answer the door? Did you tell them this or that? Did you say this or that? Did you express this more clearly? Right, and that was the other thing that got me, like the consent issues, right? Did you express that you didn't want to do this? Like, you realize that you have to say you do want it before somebody does it to you. That's what consent means. It doesn't mean that you tell them to stop when they're doing it if they haven't gotten your consent. Right? And like, they're blaming the victim, saying, did you make it really clear that you didn't want this? And it's like, actually, you should be asking, did I make it clear I did want it? Because the person who did this to me needed to know that before they even started.
Right.
Absolutely. You know, and I know y'all might have seen the, you know, the issue with the dress at the American Atheist.
Yes.
And now wait, let me just interject before you go on. I just want to say, I saw Mandisa in this dress in the it was like the hall, you know, where they do the vending. I forget what you call that, but like, you know, so you got the vendors, you got the hall. She walks by in this dress, and I was like, I love this, I love it. I was like, you know, let me see that. Turn around, what's it say? And so I was like, before the whole dress thing even happened, I already liked the dress. I was like, you know, love the dress. Yeah. So go on with your dress story, because this is really funny.
Yeah. And you know, I remember wanting to create something unique. I always have these unique, like, being uniform ideas, you know, or, you know, or, you know, just sort of like apparel ideas that I'm starting to see, you know, sort of replicated amongst other organizations. So I always wanted to get like a dress that had the BN logo on it. And so I finally had one created. And so I thought, what better way, you know, where, you know, it's the perfect place to wear it at the American Atheist Convention for this year. Yeah. Because I had just, my last day at the job was that Wednesday, the 28th, flew out to Oklahoma City, and then, you know, I was told that I would be speaking right before Hillary. And so I was like, well, I'll have to bust this out. Yeah. And so that was, you know, primarily, you know, what my thoughts were. And I love that almost everyone there who was there said that when I came off the stage, I was being asked, where can I find that dress?
Where did you get it? Yes.
Yes. And so when I saw that first comment,
first tell people about the dress. Like, what is the dress?
It was a white dress that had the Black Non-Believers logo on the front, you know, across the boobs. Yeah. And it had the flare, sort of like the baby doll style dress. It was long sleeve, but it was a little, you know, for me, it was short. It showed my legs because it was,
It's above the knee.
It flared.
Yeah.
Yes, it was above the, very much above the knee.
Because, oh my God, you have legs.
I'd say, from what I remember, it was probably mid-thigh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, it was, for some people, they said they would consider it too short. There was one woman who said that she was appalled by the dress I chose to wear on stage. I mean, the first comment was from a gentleman who said he was in the audience, and he went on to detail about how he saw that I wasn't wearing any underwear underneath. And he was glad he didn't bring his son to, But it's like this idea that what I was wearing was going to taint the fabric of the entire convention, that it took away from everything that I said, even though the only thing you could really see were my legs. Yeah. That's it.
And the message, right? The message on the back.
Yeah.
Right. Which just for people to know, on half Mandisa's butt.
It was right on my butt. It was the slogan right on my butt. Hey.
And it said, I walk by sight, not by faith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that, everybody loved it.
Yes. And I appreciate that. And I've always been, like I said, I'm a very unorthodox individual. I remember when Secular Woman, when they were first getting started, they were working on a calendar project for prominent atheists to pose either nude to semi-nude. And I'm very, very big on body positivity, positive body imagery, nudity, and stuff like that.
Sure.
Because I don't think it's anything to be ashamed of. We get a lot of, especially women, especially larger, full-figured women like myself. We get a lot of criticism for that we're not healthy enough, and that we don't look a certain way, that we wouldn't be appealing, to certain people. So therefore, we're not supposed to embrace our sexiness or our bodies or the way we look. And so I look to defy that.
Right on.
I'm like, damn your expectations of me.
Right.
And what you think it's supposed to represent. It doesn't mean I'm slutty. It doesn't mean I'm being sleazy. It doesn't mean that I am less than, anybody else.
Yep.
It just means I may like a certain style. And so when I saw those, I was like, oh, here we go again. With the people who think that, when you're a certain size or when you have a certain presence that you're supposed to look or dress a certain way, which to an extent, depending on, depending on what you're doing, that I can agree. But with that setting, the dress was perfect.
Yeah, it was very perfect. And I think there's a certain amount of, I guess, condescension involved in telling someone that you strongly disapprove of their clothing or the way they presented themselves. It's as if he had the right to.
Well, there's a certain arrogance, right?
Yes.
Like, it's not just them thinking something. It's them thinking that somehow you need to know what they think. Right.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's the thing that gets me. It's not so much. It's too bad that somebody thinks it. But when you think a thing, right? Like, it's like when people write to the show or something, and I don't know that much. I haven't seen the Godless Bitches emails that much, but I remember, like, with TAE and stuff like that, they'd write to the show, or they would contact us or be on Facebook. They're friends with us on Facebook, and something would happen, and they would just be like, oh, I thought that you were this or that, and I just don't respect you anymore. And I would be like, you don't have to respect me. It's interesting that you thought I needed to know that you don't respect me, because I don't care. Who are you? Right? And so to me, when somebody has a criticism, the criticism is valid or it's not. You don't need to try and strong-arm me into caring about your opinion by pretending that whether or not you respect me matters to me, because it doesn't. I don't care if you respect me or not. If you think I'm wrong, tell me why you think I'm wrong.
Yeah.
But I don't really care how much, when you tell somebody this, I don't respect you for this, what you're basically trying to do is to say, do what I want you to do, and then I'll respect you again.
Right.
It's a manipulation technique. It's just like a childish sort of,
There's no guarantee they're actually going to support you. I don't know yet.
But even if they would, I mean, it's not. I'm not gonna do what you want just so that you'll respect me.
Yeah.
It's like if I'm gonna do the thing that you want me to do, it's gonna be because you've convinced me that's what I should do, not because I need your respect so much that I'm just gonna kowtow to whatever it is you ask me. That's ridiculous.
Oh my gosh!
They come from a different world.
That is an attitude. That is an attitude that is very prevalent amongst the atheist leadership. I will say that being someone who is privy to some of what's in the inner circle. Mm-hmm. I have seen some of what happens when you're supposed to kiss one person's behind because they have a certain amount of money and that they might be able to give it to you. I'm like, I don't necessarily care about that. I mean, support and donations are nice, but not at the expense of, not at the expense of my expression and not at the expense of, my integrity, because I know how to work to get what I want. I've never expected it to be given to me. And so therefore, and I know how to show appreciation for people who support from a small amount to a large amount. And if that doesn't work for everybody, then fine. So, there's just so much, especially so much that is placed on us as women, mm-hmm. That we're the expectation that we're supposed to have.
Yeah. You're right. It is mostly put on women. Yeah. People feel like they can say what they want to say just because they're women. Or,
Well, when was and I mean that's a good point. I mean, when was the last time there was a male speaker anywhere who, at the end of his speech, somebody turned around and said, "God, this talk was interesting, but did you see his suit? It really sucked."
Oh, well, suit.
Yeah.
I've seen so many different talks and formal, and men will wear jeans and a T-shirt. Mm-hmm. And no one bats an eye.
Yeah.
And then the women all have to dress nicely, mm-hmm. or else they will receive the wrath of people are like, oh, she's not very professional, and and her credibility is hurt at some point.
Yeah, it's like, you want me to wear pantyhose and you show up in a T-shirt? Come on, dude.
Yeah, it happens.
Right. And then also, too, it lends this idea that just because you're dressed well, that you're representing well, which we know is a lie.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure.
We know that's a lie.
Gosh.
That just because someone, heck, there are many pastors and preachers that we can, they dress in these $1,000 suits, and what are they doing to people? Whether it's in public and in private. So how you dress is not an indication, isn't always a good indication of how you are.
Right.
Well,
book cover, right?
Yeah.
There are certain prominent atheists who have fallen of late who always dressed nicely when they spoke, and they were not nice people.
Yes.
No, they were not. Mm-mm. And so there is still this. There is just still this perception that that the other person who wrote about how she was appalled and an affront. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't do front. I don't do front.
Yeah.
You're gonna know how what you see on stage and what you see in the public is going to mirror how I am in private. In fact, it's nicer, off that stage.
Yeah.
So if that's what you're basing, what we, our movement on, then it's still, you might as well have just stayed in the church. You might as well have just stayed religious.
And what's interesting, like when you're talking about that, you might as well stay in the church, you might as well stay in religion. When you were talking about this earlier, when you're talking about it now, one of the things that I kept thinking was these ideas about weight and the idea about modesty, those are ideas that if you took out the church influence, they would be like, we wouldn't even be having this discussion.
Right.
I mean, it's the church influence. I'm not going to say that it's weird. It's like the church has a very big influence on how the culture and the society perceives things, even though it's a secular society. It is just influenced by so much religious thinking because religious people take it out into the society. They make these after the fact justifications for why their God is right. And so, and sometimes secular people buy into these cover stories. Right. So you've got the veneer and then it gets sold. And I think, you know, just it's a little bit of an off topic example, like the intelligent design / Dover trial. So you take the thing that is creationism and you're having trouble getting it in the schools. And so you repackage it as intelligent design and then you promote it out to the public at large. And then 20 years later, there are secular people still saying, but intelligent design, though, I mean, it's got some merit. Right. And you're like, you realize this is just the scratch it out ad in creationism. I mean, it's just it was the copy paste for God did it.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to other influences as well, like sex, our thinking on sex, our thinking on modesty, our thinking on even weight, right? I mean, religion comes into that, and you've got this whole thing of the assumption of the sin of gluttony and the sin of, and so, you know, you're overeating and that's a sin and that's wrong. So it doesn't just take on this sort of mild, go into your doctor, let's just make sure you're not, you know, pre-diabetic, everything's cool, okay, go home. It takes on a whole other veneer of this is evil, right? And they may not think like evil in the sense of Ted Bundy, but there is this cultural perspective underneath it. That it's worse than what it is.
Right. That your body type is some indication of your character in some way.
Yeah.
And that if you conform to a certain body type, then you are somehow more meritorious.
You're lazy, you're overeating, glutton, you're, you know, it's like all these horrible things that people associate with it. And let me just say, after having thyroid surgery, let me tell you how much your weight depends on metabolic reality.
Yeah.
Because when you don't have a metabolism anymore, you're reliant on drugs to basically control your weight now. And that's what happened to me. It was like, bam, 20 pounds, get used to it. I was like, okay, you know, and that's the new me. That is go out and buy a new wardrobe because this weight is not going away, man. And so there's the reality of what goes into a person's weight, and then there's all these weird biases that have been built up over centuries because of, you know, the religious hammering of it. And then you also have the same thing with modesty. You know, I know people who will not go to a nude beach and get nude. It's like, this is a nude beach. It's not like your nightmare where you dream that you're naked in class, right? Like everybody's naked. And these people won't take their clothes off. And I'm not just talking about women, right? I've known men who will not go to the nude beach and get naked. And it's sad to me that our society has created so much body shame, even among, I mean, it's like you have body shame even among people who would be considered socially attractive, right? So you've got even the society's idea of shame and modesty even saturates among people who have the body types that society praises. They won't even, they'll be like, oh, I'm too embarrassed to get naked. It's like, are you kidding? There's like, everybody at this beach would love to see you naked. Like, they're, but they're ashamed of their bodies. Even the people who have the bodies that everybody else would be, well, that's pretty much what my society considers the great body.
Well, and that's like, you know, when I was in the Army and I went to Germany, I mean, one of the big things in Europe is, in Germany in particular, is the saunas. You know, they tend to be co-ed, at least on some nights. And, you know, and nobody wears clothes in there. You know, you wear a towel, you're going to sit on the towel, and that's so you don't sweat on the seat and stuff, you know. But the saunas it's naked and co-ed, right? And so these young guys were all excited about going to the sauna. And I'm like, you realize that you got to get naked to go in there too, right? And it's like their faces were stricken, like, oh my God, I have to take my clothes off too.
Yeah, I don't.
It's like, yeah, dude. That's
you're not just
like,
watching.
Yeah, it's.
Oh Lordy,
it's not a porn flick, you know.
Right. But that was like that podcast. I brought this up like a few episodes back. The one that was about, you know, Man Enough. That one, and I was saying that, you know, I know it can sound really horrible to try and, you know, it's not like, oh, poor me, I'm a male model and I'm ashamed of my body, and it's like, oh yeah, we all cry tears for you. But there is something to be said about them coming forward with the fact that, you know what, I have this body that people tell me is like perfect, and I feel insecure about it, and I don't feel comfortable getting naked or taking my shirt off in front of people. And to me, it's a different kind of emphasis, but it's an important emphasis nonetheless to say, it's really pervasive when the shame that you can instill is even instilled in the people that we would consider the most attractive people in society. That is some deep shame.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's scary stuff.